The resolution on the new minimum wage consequential adjustment may mean good news for federal civil servants, but the story seems different for their counterparts in the state, whose fate now hangs in the balance. That's because the Nigeria Governors Forum says payments will be determined by each state. The chairman of the forum, Mr. Kayode Fahimi, says governors are ready to comply with the 30,000 naira minimum wage as negotiated, but they cannot be forced to comply with the consequential adjustment. According to him, payment will be determined majorly by the internally generated revenue of each state and the number of civil servants on their payroll.
For us, we've always been clear, this was a national minimum wage increase, not a general minimum wage increase, general minimum wage review. So to that extent, we don't want the media to confuse issues. It's about a national minimum wage increase. And yes, that may necessitate consequential increments. We have no doubt about that. But that's a matter for the state to discuss with their workers. The best that the forum can do is stick to what has been agreed with states. States were part of the tripartite negotiations. States agreed to 30,000 naira minimum wage. But states also know that there will be consequential adjustments, but that will be determined by what happens on a state-by-state basis, because there are different number of workers at state level, there are different issues at state level. Every state has its own trade union, joint negotiating committee, and they will undertake this discussion with their state governments.
The Nigerian Labour Congress is already reacting to the stance of the governors on the manner in which they wish to approach the payment of workers' wages in the different states of the Federation. Labour is saying that workers' wages are sacrosanct and are insisting the governors must fashion a way to ensure prompt payment. The acting president of the NLC, Mr. Amici Asugwini, who was a guest in our political programme, Politics Today, says the states must consider quick, sustainable ways of ensuring the payment of the consequential adjustment.
Governor Forum Chairman, I stand to say probably they are still referring to what we have in mind, because it is true that every state we have to engage the labor at the state level. What I don't want to get in the mind of people is as though governor will award the salary that they can pay. Is going to be a product of collective bargaining at the level of the state. The Joint Negotiating Council and the state government will actually look at the agreement we have reached at the federal level, using it as a guide to also produce their own table at the state level. And for me, it's a product of collective bargaining, not necessarily subjected to internal generated revenue or what we can pay.
So let's get some clarity from the Governors Forum on the manner in which was agreed by the governors for payment, because the implications are that the earnings will not be the same across board and perhaps each state can only pay based on what it earns. Let's speak to the head of media at the Nigeria Governors Forum, Mr. Abdulrazak Bello-Barkindo. I'd like to thank you for joining us on the program and drive straight into it, and that is the NGF's position that the national minimum wage increase is not a general minimum wage review, but some new union members have said that no state could discard the fact that a minimum wage of 30,000 naira is sacrosanct. It will be the center of every negotiation. Do you disagree?
Yeah, I disagree that it's sacrosanct. It's not. That's because governors have always insisted that, they're going to pay according to their capacity. And there's no way anybody can ram down any instruction down the throats of various states, because they have their different economic situations and different liquidity. But states have agreed that they are going to pay the 30,000 naira minimum wage to the most vulnerable in society, and that's why the baseline of 22,500 naira that the states or state governors suggested earlier was discarded. And of course, when the president set up the Bismarck-Rewane Committee, which looked into ways of generating more money, it was to ameliorate the issue of 22,500 to 30,000. But the rest of, the civil service or the higher echelon of, workers would have to, consider the financial situation of their states and accept what is available. Because there are a lot of states that probably would have their, wage bills rise by over 50%. There are states that explained their situation in yesterday's meeting. And some governors said by the time they looked at their templates and what they resolved, they discovered that they were, in deficit by about 400 million on wages alone. And that's not going to be sustainable. And it's not possible to continue to pay what is not sustainable because that will crumble or cripple.
Mr. Bello-Barkindo, we have the Secretary General of the TUC, Origi Musalawa, who's quoted to have said that the state governments are only playing games. They were represented in the Minimum Wage Committee. They cannot come around to deny their responsibility. They're simply courting labor anger, and we are ready for them.
I'm not going to respond to that because I don't think governors are very serious people. Governors are very, very concerned about the plight of the citizens in their states. So for anybody to call them game players would be, I think, a hit below the belt. And I'm not going to respond to that.
Is the NGF, the Nigeria Governors Forum, thinking outside the box, some sort of palliatives for some of the states who might default?
I don't think there are states that might default. There is a collective agreement among governors that 30,000 naira to most vulnerable in society would be paid. The remaining, the argument is over what they call the consequential increment, which they stipulated certain percentages for a certain category of people. And that's what the governors are arguing about. The governors are willing to alleviate poverty. And even right now, we're, holding a conference on how to, solve these problems. It's not like governors are, averse to what is happening in society, but they're saying, let's deal with the most vulnerable first. If you recall, only yesterday, a certain state discovered over 400 ghost workers in its list. And these are the kind of things that have arisen over time, that governors are trying to properly audit and be sure that who they are going to pay is going to earn, a reasonable amount of money, which is equivalent to the kind of effort he puts into the service. So governors are not saying they are not going to pay, but governors are going to pay according to how reasonable it is to both sustain their economies and also make sure that they lift people out of poverty.
All right, we appreciate your time. Head of Media at Nigeria Governors Forum, Mr. Abdulrazak Bello-Barkindo, thank you for joining us on the program.